Plot. It is by far the most discussed aspect of fiction nowadays. Be it interconnectivity, plot twists, or pacing, you will often find people putting a very heavy focus on the plot of any given story. And that's a good thing, as critically analyzing the plot can give a lot of insight into the mind of the author and give you a better understanding of the ideas that he wanted to communicate. However, as with any analytical model really, zealously trying to force every story to be 100% understandable and viewable under this lens and this lens only can cause one to misinterpret rather important aspects of them. My favorite example of this is today's topic. It's Jojo's Bizarre Adventure and people's obsession with the idea that it is filled with plot holes. And sure enough, there are indeed instances in the story where certain elements just disappear, never to be brought up again, or where developments in the story seemingly come out of nowhere. And on surface level, that might be to the detriment of the series. However, what if I presented the idea that plot holes in Jojo don't matter? Now, how could that be? Plot is important and it having holes should be a bad thing. And yes, generally speaking, that is not incorrect. But one thing people sometimes forget to consider is that different stories have different priorities. A whodunit style crime thriller, for example, will very likely focus mostly on its plot and holding said plot as tight as possible, as the various twists and turns of the story and of the plot itself are a major draw of that story. But in something like Jojo, priorities are set differently. But before we go any deeper than that, I would like to go over some specific examples of what people consider plot holes, as well as some quick debunks of those examples. However, as you have probably noticed from my channel, I like to talk about things in very broad strokes, and have therefore a terrible memory for detail. Luckily, up-and-coming Jojo tuber AltNarancia is here today to go a bit more into the details of Jojo and its plot holes, so please welcome him to the channel and listen to what he has to say.
Hello Oceaniz watchers, my name is Narancia, and today's PowerPoint presentation will be about Jojo's Bizarre Adventure. Oh god, the cringe. Anyway, I briefed Jojo. I really like talking about specific things happening in specific moments, so that's what I'm doing today. As many of you know, Araki comes up with most of the story as he writes along. He often tries to not let the past get in the way of what he writes at the time. While there are some possible explanations as to why, for example, Dio never used his vampiric abilities when he fought Jotaro, the main reason this was done was to keep the main theme of Part 3 going. Stance. Part 3 was not about the old Hamon vs Vampire war. Part 3 is about a new power system, and Araki didn't want the old parts to get in the way of that. With mystery also being an important element in Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, there are certain questions that will take time until they are answered. Before Part 4's stand arrow reveal, no one really knew for sure how Dio managed to gather such a big amount of stand users around him, and before that no one knew where the stand arrows even came from. Things take time. Some people question where the Walleyes in Part 8 went after being such a huge part of Jojolion. It's a question that might be answered near the end of Part 8, or maybe even in Part 9. Who knows? But even if it never gets answered, there's a big difference between a plot hole and an open mystery. And mystery is a huge part of Jojo. Jojo is not mainly about lore. Since Jojo was a very long-running weekly and nowadays monthly series, and wasn't necessarily meant to be binged in a few days, it only makes sense that some of the things are just not used again. Abilities like Giorno's deflect and especially his mind acceleration abilities aren't really that interesting after utilizing them once or twice. You can only do so much with those ideas, and a lot of the readers at the time probably forgot about them too, especially with the internet not being as big of a part of nerd culture as it is today. Not gonna lie, I even forgot them myself when reading Part 5 for the first time. Same goes for Kakyuin's possession. This ability just doesn't really fit the character of a hero. So why would Araki reutilize that? Some things are just better left dropped. Even if some people dislike it, often it just creates a better story in the long run. For the people who know it, I will just drop Jailhouse Lock because I think it's one of the most entertaining and creative fights in the series, even if a lot of people really hate it. But that's it for me. I hope you keep enjoying Oceaniz videos. Goodbye and vola revia.
As you can see, quite a few instances of #plotholes in Jojo can be explained away either by actually paying attention or by considering the goals and ideas what Araki wanted to present. And it's that second part I really want to focus on, Araki as a writer. In case you hadn't noticed, Araki and his ideas are weird. But that also extends into his writing. While many writers will often make the larger plot structure their main focus, Araki tends to be much more interested in the microcosm of ideas, concepts, and moods into his stories. And if a plot element stands in the way of those ideas, concepts, and moods, Araki may sometimes choose to either circumnavigate that element or even scrap it altogether. Probably the most famous example is the aforementioned shift from Hamon to stands. Araki realized that a very prominent plot element was limiting his creativity, as it was just linear power progression which would have become boring after Cars. So he just dumped it. And that's really what is at the heart of Jojo's plot holes. Araki's never-ending desire to explore, experiment, and reinvent, sometimes at the cost of discarding crucial and iconic parts of story and plot. You think an author who regularly throws away entire settings and casts, who created characters like Jotaro and then threw them away, would be squeamish about getting rid of some plot? He simply prioritizes his ideas over traditional ideas of plot structure. And one definitely can argue that that can be sometimes at the detriment of the story. But I personally have always seen this as the identity of the entire series. Araki's ability to quickly and decisively change, add on to, and discard his stories is what makes Jojo as fun and as bizarre as it is. The entire point and unique aspect of Jojo is, after all, that Araki is able to essentially constantly switch gears and change parts all the time. And that necessitates a certain readiness to discard, forget, and ignore previously established elements. Another aspect many fail to consider is that Araki is actually pretty self-aware about this. He has his limits when it comes to this approach. He has, in the past, realized when this tendency in writing bit him in the ass, and in one case even subsequently corrected a line, where in part 1, Baron Zeppeli says he doesn't have family, but in part 2 he has a grandson. That line was changed in the volume release of Jojo, whereas in the chapter release he still says, oh, I don't have any family. At the end of the day, the most important part to remember is that Araki's focus is squarely tied to the themes and ideas he wants to explore, which makes all the other elements, plot included, subservient to that focus. When you analyze Jojo under a lens of trying to see how much the plot connects and how tight it is, you can do that, but I feel that you sometimes miss the point of what Araki wanted to do with his stories. For him, it's about the journey and the natural evolution of his ideas throughout that journey. And that can sometimes include getting rid of important elements from the past. If you think about how many times stands changed as a concept without most of us even really noticing, that is really just it. Araki likes change, he likes his ideas, and he likes bringing his ideas to life in the purest way possible, not being constrained by either his past or conventions of writing. Again, it's fair to argue that this might be a bit of a detrimental approach in the long run, but Araki is still going, and he has pretty recently, in 2007, had his magnum opus with Steel Ball Run, so obviously this approach can't really be all that bad, even if on the micro scale sometimes it can feel like he's switching too many times. So I think that a few plot holes here and there are mostly not that big of a deal or egregious when you regard it as a price, sees it as a price to pay for Araki's style of writing. Again, next time you read or watch Jojo and you feel that you're focusing too much on things that don't add up in the long run, just take a step back and think about what these things would have hindered for Araki, because quite a lot of time there was a good reason that he removed it. Thank you for watching. Definitely check out AltNarancia's channel. He has been killing it with his videos, and he's really well versed in all things Jojo. He's much more of a Jojo focused channel than I am, so if that's your thing, definitely go check him out, and if it isn't your thing, check him out regardless. He's a really cool guy. Link in the description, and hopefully on screen if I ever figure out how to do end cards. How the hell am I a YouTuber? Anyway, have a nice day and take care. Bye.